Hi, and welcome to Manti's Book Club. Today we continue reading through Profession Witch. If you are watching this on Twitch, you can find previous episodes on my YouTube, acidmanticore, and the record of this episode will be uploaded to my YouTube channel tomorrow or day after. So, if this is the first stream that you see, you can safely pause it and go listen to the beginning of the book, or you can continue listening to this one. Today we're starting with chapter 9. After taking a quick nap for an hour or two after lunch, I remembered about the real purpose of my visit. After all, I've been in the Gava for almost a day now, and the creature is still not going to pay a visit. Maybe it is waiting for me to organize a decent meeting for it? Having found the forge by a thick stream of black smoke, I looked under the canopy. In the depths stood an anvil. The coals were smoking ominously, and pot-bellied furs of extended their steel snouts towards the forge. There are some pieces of iron, scraps, pieces of melted metal anywhere. The blacksmith himself, black with soot like a fiend from hell, was steadily flattening a white-hot rod with a hammer. Eyes at high, he turned around, nodded, handed the rod and the hammer to his assistant, and came up to me. Without further ado, I handed him the sword. After turning this formidable weapon in his hands, the blacksmith asked, in bewilderment, what I wanted to forge it into. I explained that the sword did not need to be reforged, but sharpened and balanced. The rod lowered into the water hissed loudly. The blacksmith stared at me with such a surprised expression, as if I had brought a dead horse to shoot. So, are you sure? Just in case, the blacksmith asked again. I have a large selection of ready-made weapons. Yeah, no need. Fix this one. I'll do what I can, he promised uncertainly, slapping the blade across his palm like a stick of raw smoked sausage. This is not an ordinary sword. The solid core is sheathed with silver and then with forged steel. I see. Judging by the skeptical notes in his voice, he decided that I was trying to pass off a dead horse as a sleeping one. When will it be ready? In about 3 days. Is it possible to make it this evening? We'll try. One could read from his face that even a month of forging and balancing would not help this pathetic piece of iron become a sword. A gwart would be more suitable for a girl of your build. I'm sorry, what? I'll show you. The blacksmith purposefully walked along the long table with the finished weapons and selected something long and thin from the pile of pieces of iron. Here, look. A woman's model, lightweight and with a reliable safety lock. In my hands was a polished 3-cubit stick with a hook. More precisely a staff with a curved handle in the shape of a long wolf's muzzle with ears pressed back. Pieces of translucent amber glittered in the beast's eye sockets. It's a bit heavy for a wooden one, I noted, weighing the staff in my hand. Does it have some lead in its knob? Vampire just chuckled. Give it to me, he said in a deep voice, taking the staff. Learn, baby. Taking the gourd in his left hand, the blacksmith turned the wolf's head against the sun with his right hand. Having shifted a quarter turn, it opened its mouth full of bone teeth, and at the same time a triangular light blade, 2 spans in length, jumped out from the opposite end of the cane. After making a lunge, the vampire took a step back and imitated defense, holding the gourd in outstretched arms parallel to the ground. Not bad, eh? The blacksmith turned the handle and the blade disappeared. Well, for someone who masters fighting techniques, I noted skeptically. The main thing is the element of surprise, the blacksmith argued. Gourd is something like a national weapon. It is used extremely rarely outside of the gala. Therefore, the attacker usually is dumbfounded. They were counting on an unarmed victim. What could be more harmless than a staff? A knife hidden in the boot. Can you stop a mad dog with a knife? Lynx? A bear? Why should I stop the bear? The main thing is not to stop yourself. I chuckled, looking closely at the staff with great respect. Fine, what about a ghoul? Let's say you're walking through a dark forest and lo and behold, there's a ghoul. Hello, I responded cheerfully. This is an ill-mannered ghoul. His stomach growls. Well, I don't know. I was confused. You can only stop a ghoul with magic, but unfortunately you have to kill them manually. The knife, of course, is rather weak, but the gourd is even flimsier. The blade is short, narrow, and it is useless to turn it. The ghoul won't even feel it. Oh, really? The blacksmith grinned, bringing the gourd into working condition. What about this? Under the canopy stood an old, dry log. The blade entered its rotten side like a butter. The impact left an inconspicuous hole, 3 fingers wide. The blacksmith kicked the log and it crumbled into 2 thin-walled halves and a pile of splinters. I picked one up and examined it. Well, rotten of course, but no more pliable than a ghoul. Impressive, I admitted. Can I take a closer look? There was not 1 blade, but 3. They pressed against each other like stamens in a bud. The slightest resistance to the tip activated a hidden spring, and stamens diverged. A blow to the chest could tear the heart into pieces. A blow to the stomach could turn the insides into mush. Behind the wide rim of blades, the stem, wooden part of the cane, easily fit. Yes, you can't get rid of it with a scratch. Oh, God knows if you can pull it back out. When you pull it out, the blades mechanically compress, the blacksmith commented, clearly proud of his work. Well, what do you think about it now? It's disgusting. I admitted honestly. Oh, as you wish. The blacksmith pursed his lips offendedly. But I don't advise going out with a sword against the gourd. Oh, is someone going to attack me with a gourd? But the blacksmith had already turned around and went towards the crucible. It seems that my disdain for the national weapon upset his bloodthirsty soul. After getting rid of the sword, I returned to the square and was surprised to find the fair there and in full swing. Markets are usually held in the morning. Maybe evening is like morning for vampires? But they are awake during the day too. They traded from carts, mainly food and ready-made clothes. After asking prices here and there, I was satisfied. The merchants asked quite fairly, and actually prices were much lower than in Starman. Having got hold of a hefty peach that weighed a pound and a half, I leisurely walked along the rows. There were only two of them, but they were long, ring-shaped, along the perimeter of the square. Half of the merchants turned out to be local, winged, but there were also gnomes with their constant swords, helmets, and chainmail. Elves selling airy fabrics, light-tight bows, trinkets made of semi-precious and ornamental stones. A couple of dryads with a tray of elixirs, and a loud-mouthed goblin advertising false moustaches and beards. This vegetation thickly covered his own face, starting from the eyebrows and going somewhere under the jacket. To my surprise, customers, if not crowding the counter, were at least not ending, seriously trying on garlands of spiky hair. I already knew that nature had deprived vampires of the morning ritual of soaping and shaving. That is, nothing more voluminous than eyebrows and eyelashes grew on their faces. They should be happy, but no. Maybe their chins get cold in the cold winter? But buying hair products at the beginning of summer is pure madness. Well, at least not from the point of view of moths. Is it really the latest fashion to have a moth-eating beard? After hanging out at the counter and trying on a huge red moustache for fun, I overheard a conversation between two vampires, from which it followed that they are planning to visit Kamnidержets in the near future for a tour and establishing business relations with a certain Sullivan Drajnia, representing the guild of gunsmith or weaponsmith. I wonder what percentage of obscenely overgrown men in cloaks hanging around Starman's inns are only masquerading as people. Beware, citizens, they are among us. Well, the same cannot be said about us among them. I did not notice a single, I repeat, not a single trader or a buyer of a human race. The remaining races coexisted on equal terms, bargained, shook hands, and washed deals with dark beer from barrels brought for sale by the vampire brewer. I had my eye on a light green silk dress with fine embroidery on the chest, but hesitated, wondering if the remaining money would be enough for the journey back. Did you choose anything, baby? I heard the familiar voice of my host. I just came to the conclusion that buying a dress would result in a diet of black bread and water, after which I would lose significant weight and the dress would fit me even better. Nice dress, right? Well, anything suits a pretty girl, Krina smiled. Green onion feathers puffed up from the basket she held on her bent elbow. The ragged-eared wolf followed on Krina's heels, but walking between legs and hoofs clearly did not give him much pleasure. And now he looked sadly at Krina, who was leisurely walking along the rows. After her words, the dress doubled its attracting power, and I took out my wallet, mentally thanking the robbed robber for my increased solvency. Ability to pay. Krina was just getting ready to go home, and I left the dress in her care. I still had the peach, and I shifted it from hand to hand, looking for a secluded place. Mm-hmm. That's a cozy little edge. Well, let's hope I won't be sued for desecrating the fountain with an almost clean peach. Whoops. Chapter 10. Sitting with my feet on the stone edge, I was finishing the peach and looking through the wrinkled water at small silver fish darting along the bottom like droplets of spilled mercury. Well, everything is not that bad. Either the elders hushed up the incident this morning, or the vampires are too delicate to remind me of it. Greetings, Lord. May your deeds be glorified, dear adept. Leon, maintaining complete seriousness, bent in a bow, sweeping the pavement with the edge of his cloak. I'm sorry? Well, the answer is the same as the question. Leon sat down next to me and casually touched the water with his palm. The intrigued fish swarmed closer and froze, working hard with their pectoral fins. I follow the etiquette. Yeah, but it looks very stupid. I agree. Volkan, I am not leaving, Leon. We went silent. Fountain rustled and the wind carried the settling drops towards us. Leon shook his head, stood up, and offered me his hand. Well, if you don't mind, I would like to introduce you to the Gaba better. It seems to me that the information from the author of Bloodsuckers is somewhat outdated and can hardly serve as a reliable source for coursework. Did Krina tell you? Yeah, she was very amused about it. I have no doubt, I confirmed gloomily. I've probably amused a lot of people here. Do you really want to be my guide? Yes, otherwise I'm afraid you'll spend all your health on experiments. And I'll get to the bottom of everything. Oh, quite the opposite. Without me, you won't be able to see anything illegal. The Gava is like a chest with hundreds of secret compartments. It seems to you that it is open and empty, but A secret lock is always hidden under the casing. Do you have the key? I am the key, he said seriously. Shall we start examining the treasury? I'll promise that there will be no more talk about my departure. Sure. Our fingers intertwined and Leon lifted me off the side with one move. The road went uphill, or rather there was no road. Leon led me into the sparse spruce forest, studded with the pale toadstools leading witch dances. A black woodpecker fluttered between the trunks like a bat. You can't think of a better place to bury a bloodless corpse. The conversation were becoming more and more relaxed. When you talk to a stutterer, little by little you begin to stutter yourself. A well-raised girl, having found herself in the company of rafters or loaders, within 5 minutes begins to intersperse her words with intricate curses. The dwarf's accent is as sticky as a pestilence. Leon's calm, measured speech, flavored with a fair amount of irony, had a truly murderous effect, causing frankness. Soon we were chatting like old friends. I was very surprised to learn that Leon had never traveled outside of the Gala. Well, what about courtesy visits to heads of friendly states? Leon smiled, showing his fangs. Heads of states prefer to be friends at a distance. I suppose they don't send portraits of crown princesses either? Oh, my sharp tongue. Well, it means they have such a princesses, the vampire shrugged. Leon? Yes? The lord diligently, but alas, belatedly picked up his long robe. The gold-embroidered bottom had long since become hopelessly stained with dirt. Shit, I hate these rugs. What was it in the teacher's letter? What upset you so much before dinner? Have you read up to the special ink? Of course, I shrugged as a matter of course. He wrote that he couldn't come and was sending you. But you already knew that I was coming. We thought you were coming with him. So to speak, avant-garde, testing the waters. He didn't intend to go. I blurted out. I know. Coward. The vampire sighed disdainfully, moving the spruce paw out of the way. Not at all. He just has a lot. I wanted to stand up for the teacher, but Leon raised his hand. Do not defend him. The letter speaks for itself. This is not true. My teacher can kill a ghoul with one spit. It wasn't a ghoul that he was afraid of. Moreover, he is pretty sure that the monster is a piece of my imagination. Like the elders? Leon grinned. They lied to get someone out of the Gava as soon as possible. And you are writing denunciations. No. Since you're staying, I'll try to bring you up to speed before the creature puts you on the menu. Maybe you've already warned the creature? Like, They say fear of ghouls has arrived. The prodigy of practical magic. Hide for a couple of days, otherwise you can get in trouble. I scoffed, but Leon did not consider the reason worthy of a joke. It is already amazingly smart. It goes out hunting in the dead of night when most of the locals are fast asleep, and eludes pursuit without leaving traces. It should not be underestimated. You didn't answer one question for me. Do you remember last evening I asked what advice the magician from the Kamnidержец wanted to receive? He was worried about the rumors that were spreading around the city. About increasing turnip prices? About increasing vampire thirst. Someone was killed there, someone was sucked dry there, children turn pale and die for no reason, graves are dug up in the cemeteries, coffins wide open, a free-spirited girl in a dark alley was attacked by a vampire. She told him a price and he disappeared from horror. You're still kidding? I snorted in annoyance. What? What do you want me to do, cry? Vampire tears are low rated. I imagined Leon with a shovel at the ready, tearing up a grave with the sweat on his brow, and the picture came out so grotesque that I stumbled and almost rolled down the hill. This is not funny, Volha, Leon sighed. It is scary. Do you think the teacher was afraid of you? Well, small correction. There are many of us here. So, we've got the magician, had a calm conversation. He practically believed us and was going to return to Kamnidержец in the morning and reassure all the agitated citizens, but he did not leave to see the morning. So the rumors started spreading even before his death? Yes, for the last 2 years we have been living like on a volcano. Fortunately, the Coven of Magi is on our side, and at the very least, it is cooling the lava of the people's anger. But with the death of one of their own, well, more than one, the lava bubbles up to the edges of the crater. And I am like a barrier structure. Yes, and a very fragile one. We'll see about that. Leon stopped and looked into my eyes. Volha, why did you decide to become a mage? A young, beautiful girl, why do you need this trouble? Well, to stay young and beautiful longer, I joked. And independent. Enough. I've seen enough. A woman has a little choice. Either you are married or a slut or a sorceress. The first two specialties are not inspiring. Well, the same can be said about men. Either your husband or a client or a magician. You're wrong. Wives depend on their husbands. Sluts depend on their clients. Only a witch can laugh in a man's face and say, "Try me." And do you say it often? Leon got interested. Well, that happened. The pleasure is indescribable. He looked at me for a long time, then laughed. I remembered who I was talking to and bit my tongue. We continued our journey. Leon resumed his questions. How long does it take to study to become a mage? Which, 10 years. It depends on how you study. You may not. Patience and desire must be applied to any calling. A third of adepts drop out after the first semester. Another quarter are expelled in the next 10 years. And what is the calling of a practicing magician? To protect intelligent beings, I rehearsed the first line of the first note in my life. From bloodthirsty monsters. The vampire looked forward, but I couldn't shake the feeling of the presence of an attentive, searching gaze on me. Mostly from each other. By the way, one guy with a big nose flew up to my room. I described in details the audience with the bat. And you kicked the ambassador out with a towel? Leon asked, choking with laughter. Yes, and with a foot towel. I'm not much of a diplomat, so you can't turn into bats. Dunno, haven't tried it. You're kidding me? Yes. Leon closed his eyes and turned his face to the sun, which oozed through the foliage in different spots. You will evaporate, I hissed sarcastically. There's already smoke coming out of your ears. Well, you'll bring anyone to a boil. Leon waved his hand, dispersing the smoke I casted. Well, you disappointed me. You're not afraid of garlic. You don't know how to fly. You can't evaporate in the sun and the shadow. You cast a shadow. Well, I'm sorry, I'll try to improve, the vampire promised sarcastically. Leon, what do those bats eat? Don't worry, they're not gonna attack you. But where did the legend come from then? The vampire openly laughed at my questions. Volker, legends don't come, they are created. It's a pity, I sighed sadly. There are some very beautiful legends. For example about unicorns. About these ones? Leon waved his hand casually. We had just reached the edge. The forest, having climbed the slope, ended, and below in the valley a snow-white herd was grazing. I saw a unicorn on a tapestry hanging in the school cafeteria. It was woven with goat hair and resembled a goat. Touching its curled horn was considered a good luck before the test. It's not surprising that horn very quickly became matted and peeled. They would try to restore the tapestry, but then it was decided that it would be cheaper to order a new one. The stupid face of the scapegoating unicorn stuck with me for the rest of my life, but I imagined them completely differently. When, in the spring, the school bought a batch of 3-year-olds from a horse dealer and began to distribute them among the pupils who showed themselves very good during this year, and I was one of them, even though number 4. I immediately caught my eye on a short, snow-white, well-built filly named Chamomile. She seemed to me the embodiment of the legend of unicorns. Yeah. Chamomile's eyes are black, slightly slanted, playful. The eyelids seemed to be lined with coal, and when she quietly nibbles roadside crops, her long, thick eyelashes are bashfully lowered. Like the poor horse does not know what her velvet lips are doing. The mane and tail are wavy, as if mischievous brownies braid them nightly in pigtails soaked in beer. In general, the appearance of a fairy tale horse on which even a dryad would not be ashamed to ride. I was It was very nice to feel like a dryad. But Chamomile didn't consider me that way. Over time, her favorite pastime began to look back at the rider with such a marked reproachful look, as if I were a hair short with which the gods punished her, a hair short with which the gods punished her for the grave sins of her past life. A whole herd of camomiles was grazing peacefully under the slope. But then the tall, lean stallion raised his head, sniffing warily, and I saw a thin, completely straight horn dividing his bangs into two strands, as if someone had thrown a spear at the horse and it had gotten stuck in the frontal bone. The wind blew towards the unicorns. The stallion angrily stomped his front leg, and the entire herd immediately stopped grazing and stared at us. 6 long-maned, graceful mares, as if carved from marble, and a long-legged foal hastily worming its way into the middle of the herd. The wind fluttered their silky tails, ruffled their manes, bent the green grass and bent the green grass silvery on the inside. Small waves rang along it, and it seemed that the unicorns merged with the valley, like sweeping strokes on an artist's canvas. The stallion let out a war cry, more reminiscent of a wolf's howl than a horse neigh, and reared up, kicking his front hoofs through the air. The mares flattened their ears and stood up, sticking out their horns. Great. Having dropped onto all fours, the leader galloped round the herd, knocking the mares into a heap. The foal's thin legs fussily moved in the crowd, and I was afraid that it would be trampled, but the unicorns turned out to be much more careful than inexperienced hens. They lined up in a ring, the stallion facing us, his head lowered. From under the angrily beaten hooves, grass and clouds of dirt fly in clumps, staining the long hair on his pasterns. The horn glowed at the base. Blue lightnings snaked towards the sharp tip, forming a growing bow. Not yet understanding what was happening, I dangerously moved to the very edge of the slope, holding onto the branches with my hands, and that was all the unicorn needed. Jumping up, he stamped his front legs and shook his head as if shaking off a wasp that had landed on his horn. There was a flash, a hot gust of wind, and blue sphere lightning whistled over my head, causing considerable damage to the stocky oak tree. Squeaking in surprise, I recoiled and crouched down, hoping that the unicorn would limit itself to a spectacular display of strength. But no, the horn glowed again, charging, more slowly this time. Behind me there was an ear-piercing sound, much reminiscent of the loud bleating of a goat that had fallen into a well. The stallion snorted and shook his head. The glow dimmed a little. I looked back. Leon hummed again, using a simple structure made from a piece of wood and folded palms. The unicorn neighed in response, the horn went out, the mares relaxed a little, and the curious black-eyed muzzle of a foal flashed in the gap between their rumps. But the unicorns did not come to us, but, on the contrary, ran to the other opposite side of the valley. Are they afraid of us? I asked Leon in disappointment. Of you, he corrected. Do you understand them? What did the stallion answer? That I have gone crazy, but he, thank gods, is not yet, and while he is alive, not a single mage will dare to approach his herd. Why does he dislike magicians so much? Do you love them? Of course, we almost idolize them. Yeah, in the form of stuffed animals, bone ashtrays, and decoction components. We started arguing and I gave in very quickly. For a vampire who had never left the Geva, he knew an amazing amount about humans and their customs. The heart-rending cry of "Lord! Lord!" put a bad blot on my unconvincing arguments. And unlucky boy from earlier, stumbling and breathing heavily, was climbing up the slope towards us. We waited patiently. We saw him fall, stand in his pants and the knees, jump up, shake himself off, smearing black and green stains, and run again. Well, what is it? Leon wrapped himself in his cloak and shivered. Lord, there you, that. Whom is that? Where? Leon asked seriously. Lord, then you are being called to a meeting. Well, is it that urgent? They told me to go right away as I tell you. Go, child, you did not see me. The boy stared at the Lord with owl eyes. How is that? Go and say that you did not find me. I'll be back soon, myself. But I found you, the child said stupidly. We looked at each other and sighed, like regicide conspirators whose secret meeting was interrupted by the holy fool. Okay, then go home. You don't have to go to the elders. We were silent for a while, looking at the sparkling heels of a teenager who ran down the mountain like a hare. So I'll tell them that you're coming. It's not difficult for me, he yelled, turning around as he ran. Oh, for God's sake, Leon muttered. And I wanted to show you something else. It's okay, you show me tomorrow morning. It will soon begin to get dark anyway. All right, you cannot see in the dark. And you? Better than during the day. The eyes don't get so tired and the hearing is sharper. So, tomorrow morning? The very morning, I confirmed. Okay, this is going to be it for tonight. Thank you very much and sorry for jumps. I will try to cut it out of the recording, but I'm not sure I will. Good night, see you next Thursday.